The loud hum of traffic filled the air as Zara stepped out of the taxi, dragging her suitcase behind her. She exhaled deeply, staring up at the modern apartment building before her. Finally, she was here. A new city, a new start. She had been dreaming of this moment for years, moving out of her small town to chase her career in fashion. She clutched the keys the housing agent had given her and walked toward the entrance. The agent had assured her that her new roommate was another girl, someone quiet and tidy. Zara had specifically requested that. She hated chaos. Living with someone who shared her mindset was the dream. Her heart fluttered with excitement as she rode the elevator to the 5th floor. Apartment 5B. She reached the door, adjusted her curly brown hair, and turned the key. The moment she stepped inside, her excitement turned into confusion. A pair of men's sneakers were tossed carelessly by the door. A jacket, too big to belong to a woman, hung on the coat rack. A faint scent of cologne, rich and masculine, filled the air. Zara's eyebrows knitted together. Did the previous tenant forget to move out? She cautiously wheeled her suitcase inside and turned toward the living room, only to come face to face with a half-naked man. Her breath hitched. He was standing in the middle of the room, with nothing but a pair of gray sweatpants sitting low on his hips. His chest was sculpted, smooth, and lightly tanned. His black hair was tousled as if he had just woken up, and his dark eyes met hers with lazy curiosity. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Zara found her voice. "Who the hell are you?" she blurted, stepping back instinctively. The man tilted his head, unfazed by her outburst. "I should be asking you that," he said smoothly, his lips curving into a smirk. His voice was deep, rich, and annoyingly attractive. Zara's face twisted in frustration. "I'm supposed to be living here. The agent told me my roommate was a girl." The man folded his arms across his chest. "Well, the agent lied. I live here. Adrian Knight, by the way," he added, running a hand through his messy hair. "And you are?" Zara clenched her fists. This had to be a mistake. A big, stupid, frustrating mistake. "Zara!" she gritted out. "I need to call the agent." She pulled out her phone and dialed the number, pacing the living room as she waited. Meanwhile, Adrian walked into the open kitchen, grabbing a bottle of water. She could feel his eyes on her, amused. When the agent finally picked up, Zara unleashed her frustration. "What do you mean you mixed up the names? I requested a female roommate," she nearly shouted. The agent sighed through the phone. "I'm so sorry, Miss Zara. There was an error in the system, but Adrian is a long-term tenant, and he has always shared the apartment with different roommates. He's not a bad guy." Zara let out a dry laugh. "Not a bad guy? I don't even know him." Adrian chuckled from the kitchen, as if entertained by her rage. "I promise, if you really hate it, I'll help you find another place. But at the moment, everything else is booked," the agent added. Zara sighed, pressing her fingers to her temple. Moving out wasn't an immediate option. She had already paid rent, and the city was expensive. She ended the call and turned back to Adrian, who was now leaning against the kitchen counter, drinking from his water bottle, completely unbothered. "So?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Zara exhaled sharply. "Looks like I'm stuck with you." His smirk widened. "Lucky me." Zara rolled her eyes and dragged her suitcase toward the empty bedroom. "There are going to be rules," she muttered, pushing the door open. Adrian only laughed. "We'll see about that." Zara had no idea that moving in with Adrian Knight would be the biggest storm of her life. Zara let out an exasperated sigh as she wheeled her suitcase into her room. Slamming the door shut behind her, she pressed her back against it and closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. What have I gotten myself into? The apartment was beautiful, spacious, modern, and luxurious. But none of that mattered if she had to live with him. Adrian Knight. There was something about him that set her nerves on fire. It wasn't just his cocky smirk or the way he acted as if the whole world should worship him. It was the way he looked at her, like he was amused by her presence, like she was just another plaything in his world. She pushed off the door and began unpacking, determined to set boundaries. But before she could even fold her clothes into the closet, a loud knock sounded against her door. "Zara!" His deep voice sent a shiver down her spine, but she ignored it. "What?" she called out, not bothering to open the door. "I have rules, too." Zara scoffed, rolling her eyes. She yanked open the door, her glare meeting his unreadable expression. "Excuse me?" Adrian leaned against the frame, his toned arms crossed over his chest. "You came in here talking about your rules, but if we're going to live together, you better listen to mine." Zara arched an eyebrow, folding her arms. "Oh, this should be good." His dark eyes glinted with something unreadable. "Rule number 1, you don't touch my stuff. Rule number 2, don't nag me about who I bring home." Her stomach twisted at the mention of who he brought home. She had a sinking feeling she knew exactly what kind of man he was. "And rule number 3?" she asked, bracing herself. Adrian smirked, stepping closer. "Stay out of my way." Zara's jaw clenched. She hated him already. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "Then here are mine. Rule number 1, no girls in our apartment when I'm home. Rule number 2, clean up after yourself. Rule number 3. She stepped closer, meeting his gaze head-on. "Don't test me." Adrian stared at her for a long moment, his smirk slowly fading. Something flickered in his eyes, something dark and dangerous. Then, to her surprise, he chuckled, a deep, low sound that made her stomach tighten. "You're feisty," he mused. "I like that." Zara scoffed. "I don't care what you like." She slammed the door in his face, her heart pounding. But as she leaned against it, she could hear him chuckle again from the other side. "Game on, sweetheart." Zara barely survived her first few days with Adrian. He was the most infuriating person she had ever met. He left his expensive shoes all over the place, blasted music at odd hours, and worst of all, he constantly flirted with her. But the worst part? The women. Adrian was a playboy in every sense of the word. It had only been 4 days, and he had already brought home 3 different girls. Zara had been in the kitchen making tea when she heard the first one, loud moans echoing from his bedroom. Her fingers had tightened around her mug, heat rising to her cheeks. The second girl had been even worse. This one had the nerve to waltz into the kitchen the next morning, wearing his shirt and flashing Zara a smug smile. And now, the third one. Zara had had enough. It was 2 a.m., and she had been peacefully asleep when the sound of giggles and low whispers woke her up. She groaned, turning over in bed, trying to ignore it. But then came the unmistakable sound of something, or someone, hitting the wall. That was it. Zara threw off her covers and stormed out of her room. Adrian was standing near the kitchen, his arm wrapped around a woman with platinum blonde hair and red lips. She was clinging onto him, running her hands over his chest. Zara clenched her jaw. "Adrian." He barely looked at her. "Zara," he said smoothly, as if she was just another part of the decor. "Take this somewhere else," she snapped. "Some of us actually need sleep." The blonde girl pouted, running a manicured finger down his arm. "Who's she?" Adrian smirked. "Just my roommate." Zara's stomach tightened at the way he said it, like she was nothing. She took a deep breath. "I told you, no girls in the apartment when I'm home." Adrian finally turned to her, his expression darkening. "And I told you, I don't take orders from you." His voice was low, dangerous, and for the first time, Zara felt a real tension crackle between them. The blonde girl giggled, leaning into him. "Come on, baby. Let's go to your room." Zara's fingers curled into fists. Adrian held her gaze for a long moment before smirking. "Good night, sweetheart." Then he disappeared into his room with the girl, shutting the door behind them. Zara stood frozen, anger burning in her chest. But beneath all the frustration, there was something else. Something she refused to admit. Jealousy. The next morning, Zara was still fuming. She stomped into the kitchen, determined to ignore Adrian, but stopped short when she saw him standing at the counter, this time in a crisp black suit. He looked different, powerful, dangerous. His usual lazy smirk was gone, replaced by a cold, unreadable expression. His hair was styled, his Rolex glinting under the morning light. She blinked. "Why do you look like that?" Adrian glanced up at her, taking a sip of his coffee. "Like what?" "Like some billionaire CEO?" His lips twitched slightly, but he said nothing. Zara frowned. "Wait, what do you even do for a living?" Adrian set down his coffee, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "I own Knight Enterprises." Her breath hitched. Knight Enterprises. The multi-billion-dollar empire known for luxury hotels, high-end fashion, and international investments. Adrian Knight wasn't just some arrogant playboy, he was a billionaire. And suddenly, her world tilted. Zara gritted her teeth as she stood in the kitchen, staring at Adrian like he had just grown two heads. "You own Knight Enterprises?" she repeated, her voice laced with disbelief. Adrian smirked, adjusting his cufflinks. "Took you long enough to figure it out, roommate." Her fists clenched. The arrogance dripping from his voice made her want to throw something at him. This man, this playboy, this infuriating, rule-breaking menace was not just rich. He was filthy rich. And he had been walking around half-naked, bringing girls into their apartment as if he had nothing better to do. "You disgust me," she muttered, grabbing her coffee mug with more force than necessary. Adrian only chuckled, unbothered. "You say that now, but I bet you dream about me when you sleep." Zara almost choked. "In your nightmares, maybe." He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "Oh? Then why did you storm out last night? Jealous, sweetheart?" She scoffed. As if. Adrian leaned in, his breath teasing her skin. "Careful, Zara. You act like you hate me, but deep down, you want me." Zara shoved him away, rage burning in her chest. "You're the problem, Adrian. You think the world revolves around you just because you have money." He laughed, the sound dark and rich. "No, sweetheart. I know the world revolves around me. That's the difference between you and me." She had never wanted to punch someone so badly in her life. "I cannot wait to move out of here," she snapped. Adrian tilted his head. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing about you." The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. They were too close, too caught up in their own battle. Then, as if the universe wanted to ruin her life even more, her phone rang. It was her boss. Zara frowned and picked up. "Hello?" "Zara, change of plans. You'll be working on a new project with Knight Enterprises." Her blood ran cold. Excuse me?" she choked out. "Adrian Knight personally approved you as the lead designer for their new luxury brand launch. It's a massive opportunity." Zara's heart dropped. She turned to Adrian, who was watching her with a slow, knowing smirk. Number. Tell me this is a joke," she whispered. "Not at all," her boss chirped. "He specifically asked for you." Zara's eyes widened as Adrian gave her a lazy wink. Oh, he was playing with her. He knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't just coincidence. This was war. Zara clenched her phone so tightly she thought it might shatter. "Let me get this straight," she said, her voice barely controlled. "You're saying I have to work with him?" "Not just work with him," her boss replied, excitement evident in her tone. "You'll be leading the design team for Knight Enterprises' newest luxury fashion brand. It's the biggest opportunity of your career, Zara. You can't say no." Zara's stomach twisted. She turned her gaze to Adrian, who stood there looking smug as if he could already taste her suffering. "Oh, I can say no," she snapped. Her boss sighed. "I know you're independent, Zara, But this is a $1 billion deal. If you pull this off, your name will be everywhere. You'll be unstoppable. Zara knew she was right. This was what she had been working toward. A chance to make a name for herself in the fashion industry. A chance to prove she was more than just another designer. But working with him? She glanced back at Adrian, whose smirk hadn't faded. Fine, she gritted out. Fantastic, her boss chirped. Your first meeting with Adrian is this afternoon at Knight Enterprises. Don't be late. The line went dead. Zara wanted to scream. Adrian chuckled, stepping closer. See, sweetheart, you can't escape me. Zara took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. This doesn't change anything. I still hate you. His dark eyes glinted. Keep telling yourself that. Knight Enterprises was even more intimidating in person. The towering glass skyscraper loomed over the city, its sleek design screaming wealth and power. Zara had to admit, it was impressive, even if it belonged to him. As she entered the lobby, heads turned. The staff whispered among themselves, eyeing her curiously. A tall, well-dressed assistant approached. Miss Zara, Mr. Knight is expecting you. Of course he was. She followed the assistant to the elevator, which took her straight to the top floor. The moment the doors opened, she was greeted by the sight of luxury. Dark mahogany desks, floor-to-ceiling windows with a breathtaking view of the city, and the faint scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. And there he was. Adrian Knight sat behind a massive glass desk, his suit tailored to perfection, exuding power and control. He looked up, a slow smirk curling his lips. Right on time, sweetheart. Zara rolled her eyes, stepping into his office. Let's just get this over with. Adrian gestured to the chair opposite him. Sit. She hesitated, but finally did, crossing her arms. What do you want? He leaned back in his chair, watching her with lazy amusement. You, obviously. Zara's breath hitched, but she quickly masked her reaction. Professionally, Knight. His smirk deepened. Relax, sweetheart. This is strictly business. She narrowed her eyes. Then why do I feel like you're playing games? Adrian tapped his fingers against his desk. Because I am. Zara clenched her jaw. Let me make something clear. He cut her off smoothly. I chose you for this project because you're talented, but don't think for a second that means I'll go easy on you. Zara's eyes darkened. Good, because I don't need easy. A charged silence filled the air. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was thick, suffocating. Then Adrian smirked. This is going to be fun. Zara shot him a glare. I hate you. His lips twitched. Keep saying that, sweetheart. And just like that, the war had officially begun.